Welcome to Section 17.1, Part 1. This is the 173rd session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll learn how to manage a security incident from the moment it surfaces. We'll answer several questions. What actually counts as an incident? What are the phases of incident management? And why is counterattacking off the table? How do you detect a possible incident? And who responds first? And once an incident is confirmed, what does a real response look like? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because incidents are not a maybe, they are a when. Picture a payments company that spots strange outbound traffic from a database at 2 a.m. The difference between a minor scare and a headline breach is how fast and how cleanly your team reacts. On the job, you are the person who decides whether that alert is noise or the first thread of a live attack. So what actually counts as an incident? In the broadest sense, an incident is any event that harms the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of your assets. That wide net includes storms, cut cables, and honest accidents. But in this discipline, we care about the narrower version, the computer security incident. That means harm caused by an attack or by malicious, deliberate, or careless human action. Think of a fire alarm. It can trip for a real blaze or for burnt toast, but here we focus on the fire that someone actually set. How do organizations pin down that definition in practice? They write it into their security policy or their incident management plan. The definition is usually short, then backed by concrete examples. A team might classify any attempted network intrusion, any denial of service attempt, any malware detection, any unauthorized data access, or any policy violation as an incident. Newer lists also flag things like compromised AI agents, spreading false information, or live adversarial attacks against production machine learning models. Naming these examples up front means nobody has to guess in the heat of the moment. What are the phases of managing an incident? The certification lays out 7 ordered steps: detection, response, mitigation, reporting, recovery, remediation, and lessons learned. Treat this as a loop, not a straight line, because what you learn at the end feeds better detection at the start. You may see other frameworks compress these into 4 phases, but the elements and the goal are the same. Picture a pit crew running a fixed, rehearsed sequence every single stop. Why is counterattacking never part of the plan? Because striking back is counterproductive and often illegal. If you hack the source, you likely hit an innocent victim, since attackers hide behind spoofed addresses and hijack machines in a botnet. And if you do reach the real attacker, you have just made it personal and invited a grudge campaign. Think of a burglar who fled through 3 neighbors' yards. Firing blindly into those yards only harms the neighbors. You call the professionals and preserve the scene instead. How do you detect a possible incident? Your environment offers several signals. Intrusion detection and prevention systems raise alerts when they see suspicious behavior. Anti-malware tools pop up when they catch malicious code. Automated log scanners flag predefined events like the sudden use of special privileges. And ordinary users report trouble, such as a resource they suddenly cannot reach. The catch is that an alert is not proof. Detection systems throw false alarms, and users make simple mistakes, so every signal has to be investigated. Who is the first person on the scene? That role is the first responder. These IT professionals arrive first and can tell a routine glitch apart from a genuine security incident. Compare them to medical first responders at a crash. Their training lets them separate a scratch from a life-threatening injury and act accordingly. In the same way, your responders need specific training to know when to troubleshoot quietly and when to escalate loudly. Once an event is confirmed as an incident, they escalate and move to the response stage. What does response actually involve? Response scales to the severity of the incident. For a major event, many organizations activate a dedicated incident response team, and a formal plan spells out exactly who calls that team in and when. These trained members investigate, contain, and assess the damage, gather evidence, report, and drive recovery. They also help with root cause analysis and lessons learned. Think of them as a rehearsed emergency crew who show up for the big fires, not the burnt toast. Why does speed matter so much during response? Because time is the attacker's biggest ally. Imagine an intruder pulling records from a customer database. Cut them off in minutes, and they leave with almost nothing. Give them hours or days of quiet access, and they walk away with the entire table. A fast, clean response is the single strongest lever you have to shrink the damage. How do you handle evidence? And what must you never do? Treat everything as potential evidence, because management may decide to prosecute. If prosecution is even possible, protect the data so it holds up in court. And here is a rule that trips people up. Do not power off a compromised machine while containing it. Volatile memory and temporary files vanish the instant the system loses power. Forensic tools can recover that live data, but only while the machine stays running. Pulling the plug destroys the very proof you need. So let's bring it together. An incident, in our world, is harm from an attack or human action. And organizations define it clearly in advance. Management follows 7 ordered, repeating steps and never includes striking back. Detection comes from tools and users, but every signal needs a first responder to verify it. Response scales with severity, moves fast, and protects volatile evidence by keeping systems powered on. Master this front half of the life cycle, and the containment and recovery steps will slot right in. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 17.1, part 2. This is the 174th session of the CISSP exam prep series. This part picks up the incident lifecycle right where the response stage left off. In this session, we'll walk the back half of managing an incident. We'll answer several questions. How do you contain the damage during mitigation? Who needs to be told inside and outside the organization? How do you safely bring a system back to life? How do you stop the same thing from happening again? And how do you turn the whole ordeal into a lasting improvement? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because containing an attack is only half the job. Imagine a hospital network hit by ransomware just before its quarterly reporting deadline. Stopping the spread is urgent, but so is notifying leadership, meeting breach laws, rebuilding cleanly, and closing the hole for good. On the job, these later stages are where you protect the business legally and make sure the next attacker finds a harder target. How do you contain the damage during mitigation? Mitigation is all about limiting the scope. If an infected machine is leaking data through its network adapter, you disable that adapter or unplug the cable. Sometimes you isolate an entire subnet from the rest of the network so the problem cannot spread. Once the trouble is fenced in, your team can work on it calmly. In some cases, responders quietly contain the incident without tipping off the attacker, so they can watch the activity and map the full scope. Think of sealing off one flooded room before the water reaches the whole building. Who needs to be told about an incident? Reporting flows both inside and outside the organization. Internally, a minor malware hit does not warrant a call to the chief executive, but a serious breach absolutely does. Upper management needs to know when something major is unfolding. Picture a collections firm holding medical and financial records for millions of patients. If ransomware locks that data, you can be certain leadership hears about it fast. Match the audience to the severity. What about your legal duty to report outside the organization? Many jurisdictions have breach laws, and they often require you to notify when sensitive data is exposed. This is especially strict for personally identifiable information. If an attacker gains that kind of data about individuals, the law typically requires you to tell those individuals what happened and what was taken. Every organization is responsible for knowing which laws apply to it. Treat notification as a legal obligation, not an optional courtesy. Should you involve law enforcement? Often, yes, and sometimes you must. For serious incidents, consider reporting to official agencies who may assist the investigation and use the data to protect other organizations. Some companies avoid this to dodge bad publicity or an intrusive probe, but that choice disappears once personal information is exposed. Certain standards, like the major payment card requirements also mandate reporting specific incidents. And remember, many incidents go unreported simply because staff never recognize them, which is why training is the real fix. How do you safely bring a system back to life? Recovery returns the system to full operation. For a minor incident, that might be a simple reboot. For a major one, you may rebuild the system entirely and restore data from the most recent backup. When you rebuild, make sure the result is at least as secure as it was before the attack. Strong configuration and change management give you the documentation to get this right. Double-check the access control lists, the running services and protocols, the patches, the user accounts, and any known compromises. If you suspect the attacker planted hidden malicious code, a full rebuild from scratch is the safest path. How do you stop the same thing from happening again? That is the job of remediation, and its engine is root cause analysis. You examine the incident to find exactly what let it succeed, then recommend a fix. Say attackers reached a database through a website. Maybe the server was missing patches, so you stand up a patch management program. Maybe the application skipped input validation and allowed an injection attack, so you add proper validation. Maybe the database sat on the web server itself, so you move it behind another firewall. Fix the cause, not just the symptom. How do you turn the ordeal into a lasting improvement? The lessons learned stage examines both the incident and your response for anything worth changing. The response team leads this, joined by others who know the event well. If containment took too long, you ask why. Maybe training was thin, maybe the first alert went unrecognized, maybe evidence got corrupted during handling. Crucially, the output loops back to detection, so you can tune your intrusion detection systems and catch the next attempt sooner. The team usually writes a report, and management decides which recommendations to adopt, owning the risk of any they reject. Think of a flight crew debriefing after a rough landing, so the next one is smoother. So let's bring it together. Mitigation fences in the damage, sometimes without alerting the attacker. Reporting runs inside to management and outside to individuals, agencies, and regulators as the law demands. Recovery restores the system to at least its former security, often by rebuilding from scratch. Remediation uses root cause analysis to kill the underlying flaw. And lessons learned feeds everything you found back into stronger detection. Together with the response stage, that completes a full, repeating incident lifecycle. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 17.2, part 1. This is the 175th session of the CISSP exam prep series. This part opens our tour of the controls and attacks that shape day-to-day defense. In this session, we'll build the foundation for detecting and preventing incidents. We'll answer several questions. What is the difference between a preventive and a detection control? What basic steps stop a huge share of attacks? Why do we study attack methods at all? What is a botnet, and how do you keep systems out of one? And what is a denial of service attack in its various forms? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because attackers probe constantly, and you cannot defend what you do not understand. Picture a mid-sized retailer whose website suddenly slows to a crawl during a holiday sale. Is it traffic, a flood attack, or a hijacked fleet of devices hammering the server? On the job, recognizing the shape of an attack lets you pick the right countermeasure fast, instead of guessing while revenue leaks away. What is the difference between a preventive and a detection control? A preventive control tries to stop unwanted activity before it happens. Think of fences, locks, encryption, firewalls, and intrusion prevention systems. A detection control works after the fact, discovering activity that already occurred. Think of security guards, audit trails, honeypots, and intrusion detection systems. A quick note for the exam. You will see both preventive and preventative used, and they mean the same thing. Picture a locked door as prevention and a camera recording the hallway as detection. What basic steps stop a huge share of attacks? No single move blocks everything, but a handful go a long way. Keep systems and applications patched, because unapplied fixes protect nobody. Remove or disable services and protocols you do not need, since an attacker cannot exploit what is not running. Deploy intrusion, detection, and prevention systems. Use current anti-malware and enable firewalls on both the network and the host. Finally, run configuration and system management so machines stay secure over their whole lifetime. Think of it as basic hygiene that quietly prevents most infections. Why do we study attack methods at all? Because you cannot prevent, recognize, or respond to what you have never seen. Security professionals learn common attacks so they can take proactive steps, spot the attack in progress, and react correctly. This is not about memorizing every exploit ever written. It is about knowing the shapes and patterns well enough to react under pressure. Think of a lifeguard who studies how drowning actually looks, so they recognize it instantly instead of freezing. What is a botnet? A botnet is a collection of infected computers acting like remote-controlled robots, often called bots or zombies. A criminal known as a bot herder commands them all through one or more command and control servers. The bots check in for instructions, then do whatever they are told, launching distributed denial-of-service attacks, blasting spam and phishing, or getting rented out to other criminals. Machines usually join a botnet after being infected with malicious code, which can quietly install keyloggers and hunt for passwords. Picture an army of hijacked puppets, all waiting on strings pulled from a single hidden hand. How do you keep systems out of a botnet? Use defense in depth, layering several protections. Since infection is the usual entry point, keep anti-malware current and keep systems patched, because much malware exploits unpatched flaws. But tools alone are not enough, since attackers constantly craft malware that slips past scanners. That makes user education essential, because most infections start with a malicious phishing email or a trick that harvests a password. Keep browsers and their plugins updated, and never disable built-in browser protections, like sandboxing just for a little speed. Think of layered locks, alarms, and an alert household, not a single deadbolt. What is a denial-of-service attack? A denial-of-service attack stops a system from serving legitimate requests. One common form floods a server with more packets than it can process. Another exploits a known flaw to crash the system or pin its processor at full load. The result is degraded performance, crashes, reboots, or blocked service. A basic denial of service comes from a single source against a single target, and attackers usually spoof the source address to stay anonymous. Picture one prank caller jamming a hotline so no real caller can get through. What makes a distributed denial of service worse? In a distributed denial of service attack, many systems strike a single target at the same time. Attackers rarely round up volunteers. Instead, they compromise many machines or simply point a botnet at the victim. So the flood arrives from thousands of directions at once. These attacks typically target internet-facing systems, and dedicated mitigation services can filter or divert enough malicious traffic that users barely notice. A variant called a reflective attack bounces traffic off other services so it lands on the victim from innocent-looking sources. Picture thousands of prank callers hitting that hotline in unison from numbers that all look legitimate. So let's bring it together. Preventive controls stop activity before it happens, while detection controls catch it after. Basic hygiene, patching, trimming services, firewalls, anti-malware, and configuration management prevents most attacks. We study attack shapes so we can recognize and respond fast. A botnet is a herd of infected machines under one criminal's control, best countered with layered defenses and educated users. And denial of service, whether from one source or a distributed flood, aims to drown out legitimate traffic. Next, we will dig into specific flood attacks and how each one works. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 17.2, Part 2. This is the 176th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. This part drills into the specific attacks you need to recognize on site. In this session, we'll examine several classic attack techniques, We'll answer several questions. How does a SYN flood abuse the handshake? And how do you stop it? How does a TCP reset kill a live session? What are Smurf and Fraggle attacks? And how is a ping flood similar? Which legacy attacks still teach us something? What makes a 0-day so dangerous? How does an on-path attacker sit between two systems? And why is employee sabotage such a distinct threat? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because attackers keep reworking old ideas into new variants. Picture a trading platform where sessions keep dropping and login servers stall right at market open. If you know how these techniques behave, you can name the pattern and apply the fix in minutes. On the job, that fluency is the difference between a controlled response and a scramble while the business bleeds. How does a SYN flood abuse the handshake? Normally, two systems open a connection with a three-step handshake: a synchronize, acknowledge, then an acknowledge. In a SYN flood, the attacker sends a torrent of opening requests, but never sends the final acknowledgement. The server holds resources open for each half-finished connection, waiting minutes for a reply that never comes. Send enough, and the server exhausts its memory and processing power and stops answering real users. It is like a prankster offering a handshake, then yanking their hand away and leaving you reaching. How do you stop a SYN flood? A few defenses work well together. SYN cookies let the server skip reserving heavy resources until a real acknowledgement arrives, which shrinks the attacker's leverage. You can also shorten how long the server waits for that acknowledgement, so half-open connections flush from memory faster. Firewalls and intrusion detection and prevention systems often include SYN attack checks too. Note that simply capping open sessions backfires, because once the cap is hit, legitimate users get locked out along with the attack. How does a TCP reset attack kill a live session? Sessions normally end with a finish or a reset packet. An attacker abuses this by spoofing the source address and sending a forged reset, tricking two systems into tearing down an active connection. They then have to rebuild the session from scratch. This hits hardest on systems that rely on long-lived, persistent connections, because recreating the session and its data is far more work than a quick reconnection. Think of someone forging a hang-up signal on your phone call, forcing you to redial and start over every time. What are Smurf and Fraggle attacks? Both are flood attacks that trick a whole network into attacking a victim. A Smurf attack sends a broadcast ping while spoofing the victim's address as the source, so every machine that answers floods the victim with replies. A Fraggle attack does the same thing but uses certain UDP ports instead of ping. Modern routers are configured not to forward directed broadcasts, and firewalls often block the relevant traffic, so these are rarely a problem today. Picture forging someone's return address on a mass mailing, so every reply lands in their mailbox. How is a ping flood similar? A ping flood simply overwhelms a victim with ping requests. On its own, it is limited, but launched from a botnet as a distributed attack, tens of thousands of systems pinging at once can bury a target so it has no time for legitimate traffic. The common defense is to block the incoming ping requests, which stops the flood without killing all of the traffic. Active intrusion detection systems can even detect the flood and block those requests only while the attack is underway. Which legacy attacks still teach us something? Older attacks rarely succeed now, but their variants keep resurfacing, so recognizing the originals helps you spot the new ones. A ping of death used oversized packets that some systems could not handle. A teardrop attack sent fragments that the target could not reassemble, crashing it. A land attack spoofed a victim's own address as both source and destination, tangling the system with itself. Many of these cause buffer overflows, and the strongest defense across the board is simply keeping systems patched. Think of learning old lockpicking tricks, so today's clever variation does not surprise you. What makes a 0-day so dangerous? The 0-day exploits a vulnerability that defenders do not yet know about, so no patch exists. The purest version is when an attacker discovers the flaw first and is the only one aware of it. The label also covers the gap when a vendor knows but has not shipped a fix, and even the window right after a patch drops before organizations apply it. If an attack lands weeks after a patch was available, that is not a 0-day, it is just an unpatched system. Your defenses are the basics: trimming services, running firewalls and intrusion detection, and using honeypots to observe unknown attacks. How does an on-path attacker sit between two systems? In a man-in-the-middle attack, also called an on-path attack, the attacker slips into the flow between two endpoints. In one form, they simply sniff the traffic. In the more powerful form, they act as a hidden relay. So the client and server each believe they are talking directly, while the attacker captures and even alters everything in between. This takes real skill, since the attacker must impersonate the server to the client and the client to the server at the same time. Keeping systems patched and using a VPN both help defend against it. Picture a dishonest interpreter relaying two people who trust every word, quietly rewriting the message. Why is employee sabotage such a distinct threat? Because it comes from inside, from someone who already has knowledge and access. Sabotage is deliberate destruction or disruption by an employee, and the risk spikes when a worker turns disgruntled, expects an unfair firing, or keeps access after being let go. That is exactly why termination should be swift and access should be disabled immediately. Beyond that, lean on intensive auditing, monitoring for abnormal activity, open communication, and fair recognition of good work. Think of a trusted key holder who turns bitter, and why you change the locks the moment trust breaks. So let's bring it together. A SYN flood drowns the handshake, countered with SYN cookies and shorter waits. A TCP reset forges a teardown of live sessions, Smurf, Fraggle, and ping floods. Weaponized broadcasts and pings, but modern configuration blocks most of them. Legacy attacks teach the patterns behind new variants, and patching is the common cure. 0 days exploit unknown flaws. On-path attackers relay and rewrite traffic. And sabotage strikes from trusted insiders. Recognize these shapes, and the countermeasures follow. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 17.2, Part 3. This is the 177th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. This part turns from the attacks themselves to the systems built to catch them. In this session, we'll unpack intrusion detection and prevention. We'll answer several questions. What is an intrusion detection system, and how does prevention differ? How does knowledge-based detection spot attacks? How does behavior-based detection spot attacks instead? And what do false positives and false negatives really mean? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because these systems are the eyes watching your network while your team sleeps. Picture a logistics firm whose overnight monitoring flags a strange spike in failed logins across dozens of servers. Whether that alert is trusted, tuned, or ignored comes down to how well you understand detection. On the job, you are the one who configures these tools, judges their alerts, and decides when a warning becomes an investigation. What is an intrusion detection system? An intrusion happens when an attacker slips past your controls and reaches your resources. An intrusion detection system automates the inspection of logs and real-time events to catch those attempts and system failures. When it spots something suspicious, it raises an alert or an alarm, and in some cases it can adjust the environment to stop the attack. Treat it as one layer in defense in depth. It complements your firewalls and other controls, but it never replaces them. Think of it as a smoke detector that watches constantly and shouts the moment something smells wrong. So how does prevention differ from detection? An intrusion prevention system includes everything a detection system does, then adds the power to stop or block an attack outright. The key distinction is placement. A true prevention system sits inline, directly in the traffic path, so every packet must pass through it, and it can drop the bad ones before they reach the target. If you disable those blocking features, it simply behaves like a detection system again. Picture a security checkpoint standing in the only doorway, not a camera watching from the corner. How does knowledge-based detection spot attacks? This is the most common method, and it works from signatures, much like anti-malware. The vendor maintains a database of known attack patterns, and the system matches live traffic against it. Find a match, and it raises an alert. The big advantage is a low false positive rate, because a match is a match. The big weakness is that it only catches what it already knows. A brand new attack, or even a lightly modified old one, can slip right past. And just like anti-malware, the signature database must be updated constantly to stay useful. How does behavior-based detection work instead? Rather than matching signatures, it learns what normal looks like. It builds a baseline of typical activity over a period of time, then flags anything that deviates from it. That lets it catch things a signature system would miss, like a sudden traffic spike, a burst of failed logins, or activity at odd hours. Its great strength is spotting brand new attacks that have no signature yet. It behaves almost like an expert system, comparing current events against what it has learned. Its main weakness is noise, because normal behavior varies, so it tends to raise many false alarms. Remember to update the baseline whenever the network changes, or it will flag normal activity as suspicious. Think of a guard who knows the regulars so well that any unfamiliar face stands out. What do false positives and false negatives really mean? Picture just two facts. Either an incident happened or it did not, and either the system detected something or it did not. That gives 4 outcomes. A true positive is an incident that the system correctly detects. A false negative is an incident that slips by undetected, which is the dangerous one. A false positive is an alarm with no real incident behind it, which wastes time and erodes trust. And a true negative is a quiet moment correctly left alone. The same grid applies elsewhere, like a biometric system that should accept the real user and reject an imposter. How do these detection methods trade off against those errors? Here is the balance you must manage. Signature-based systems keep false positives low because they only fire on a real match. But they suffer high false negatives against new attacks they have no signature for. Behavior-based systems flip that, catching novel attacks but flooding you with false positives because the line between normal and abnormal is fuzzy. That is why so many real systems combine both methods, pairing the precision of signatures with the reach of behavior analysis. Think of one guard who checks IDs against a watch list, working beside another who simply notices when something feels off. So let's bring it together. An intrusion detection system watches logs and events and raises alerts, while a prevention system sits in line and blocks attacks outright. Knowledge-based detection matches known signatures with few false positives but misses new attacks. Behavior-based detection learns a baseline and catches novel attacks at the cost of more false alarms. The 4 outcomes, true and false, positive and negative, frame every alert you will ever judge. Combine both methods, and you cover far more ground than either alone. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 17.2, part 4. This is the 178th session of the CISSP exam prep series. This part covers how detection systems respond, where they live, and their inline cousin. In this session, we'll go deeper into how these systems act and deploy. We'll answer several questions. How does an intrusion detection system respond to an event? What is the difference between a host-based and a network-based system? Why is encrypted traffic such a challenge? And what exactly is a network-based prevention system? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because knowing a tool exists is not the same as placing it well. Picture a financial services team deciding whether to put sensors on every laptop at the network core, or both. Get the placement and response mode right, and you see attacks early and stop them cleanly. Get it wrong, and you either drown in noise or miss the intrusion entirely. On the job, these are the design calls that shape whether monitoring actually works. How does an intrusion detection system respond to an event? Both signature and behavior systems trigger on an alert, then respond in one of 2 ways. A passive response logs the event and sends a notification by email, text, or a report, often on the big screens in a round-the-clock operations center. An active response goes further, changing the environment to block the activity. For example, on spotting a flood from one address, it can rewrite firewall rules to drop that traffic, and against a ping flood from many sources, it can block the offending traffic type. Administrators configure these active responses in advance. Think of a passive alarm that just rings versus an active one that also locks the doors. What separates a host-based from a network-based system? It comes down to what each one watches. A host-based system monitors a single computer, inspecting its processes and its system, application, and firewall logs. It can see fine detail, even pinpointing the exact files an attacker touched, and it can catch a remote takeover of that host. A network-based system watches traffic across the whole network using sensors at key points like routers and switches. Each has trade-offs. Host-based systems cost more to manage per machine, consume local resources, and can be disabled by an intruder on the box. So many organizations reserve them for key servers. Network-based systems centralize administration and barely dent performance. Picture a guard posted inside one vault versus cameras covering every hallway. Why is encrypted traffic such a challenge for these systems? Because most internet traffic is encrypted, and a detection system cannot inspect what it cannot read. Imagine a user unknowingly connecting to a malicious site over an encrypted session. The bad payload rides inside that encryption, invisible to the monitor, and slips right through. Attackers exploit this deliberately, and botnets often use encrypted channels to hide their check-ins. The common answer is a decryptor that intercepts the encrypted session, decrypts the traffic for inspection, then re-encrypts it. But it has a blind spot. If an attacker encrypts data on the host before it ever enters that session, the decryptor cannot open it. Think of a sealed envelope you can steam open at the mailroom, unless the sender used a second lock you have no key for. What exactly is a network-based prevention system? It is a special kind of active detection system placed directly in line with the traffic. Because every packet must flow through it, it can analyze each one and choose what to forward and what to block, stopping an attack before it ever reaches the target. Contrast that with an active detection system that is not in line. It can only react after the traffic has already arrived, so it responds to an attack in progress rather than preventing it. A clear industry trend is replacing detection systems with prevention systems by moving them in line. Picture the difference between a bouncer who checks everyone at the door and a guard who only reacts once a troublemaker is already inside. So let's bring it together. Detection systems respond passively by logging and notifying, or actively by changing the environment to block. Host-based systems watch one machine in fine detail, while network-based systems watch broad traffic with central management. Encrypted traffic hides threats, and decryptors help but cannot open data encrypted before the session. And a prevention system sits in line to block attacks before they land, which is why the trend is to move detection in line and let it prevent. Place these tools well, and your network gains both eyes and reflexes. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 17.2, Part 5. This is the 179th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. This part rounds out our preventive toolkit, from decoys to firewalls to outside help. In this session, we'll cover the specific controls that round out network defense. We'll answer several questions. What are honeypots and honeynets? And where is the legal line? Why do warning banners matter? How does anti-malware defend a whole organization? What are allow lists and deny lists? What do firewalls actually do? What is sandboxing? And when do you bring in third-party security services? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because no single control carries the load alone. Picture a software company layering decoys, banners, anti-malware, firewalls, and outside experts into one coordinated defense. Each control covers a gap the others leave open. On the job, your value is not knowing one tool deeply, but weaving many into a system where an attacker who slips one net lands squarely in another. What are honeypots and honeynets? A honeypot is a decoy computer built to lure intruders, and a honeynet is two or more honeypots wired together to fake a whole network. They look real but hold nothing of value, so any access is almost certainly an intruder, since no legitimate user has a reason to touch them. They keep attackers busy and away from the real assets, and they let you watch an attacker's moves and buy time to identify them. Administrators often plant fake flaws, called pseudo-flaws, to make the trap convincing and run honeypots on virtual machines so they can reset with a snapshot after each attack. Think of a fake safe stuffed with blank paper, wired with cameras. Where is the legal line with a honeypot? It sits between enticement and entrapment. Enticement is legal. You leave a tempting but open system out there, and an attacker who finds it on their own makes their own choice to break in. Entrapment is illegal. That is when you actively lure or trick someone into an attack they would not otherwise have attempted, then try to charge them. The distinction is who initiated the act. Laws vary by location, so know your local rules. Picture leaving an unlocked shed anyone might wander into versus mailing someone a personal invitation to trespass. Why do warning banners matter? A warning banner tells users and intruders the ground rules, usually noting that activity is monitored and recorded and reminding people what is off limits. Their wording carries real legal weight because it can bind users to acceptable behavior and support prosecution later. Even an unauthorized person who logs in sees it. Think of it as the electronic version of a no trespassing sign. It also reminds your legitimate users of the acceptable use policy they already agreed to. Clear warnings turn a fuzzy situation into a defensible one. How does anti-malware defend a whole organization? The core defense against malicious code is up-to-date anti-malware, since attackers constantly tweak malware to dodge detection, and modern tools check for new signatures many times a day. But smart organizations layer it. Filter content at the network boundary, scan on the email servers, and run anti-malware on every endpoint, so infections are caught from any direction. Install just one anti-malware product per system, because two will fight each other and waste resources. Pair this with least privilege, so a limited user cannot install malicious software, and with user education, since one unopened attachment can prevent an entire infection. Think of a building with a screened lobby, mailroom scanners, and a detector in every office. What are allow lists and deny lists? These control which applications may run, and they were once called whitelists and blacklists. An allow list names the approved applications and blocks everything else, while a deny list names the forbidden applications and blocks only those. A system uses one approach or the other, never both. Allow lists are stricter and can even use file hashes, which conveniently blocks an infected version 2 because infection changes the hash. The strictest example is a mobile platform that only runs vetted apps from an approved store. A deny list fits when you simply want to block a known set, like keeping games off work machines. Think of a guest list at the door versus a banned persons list. What do firewalls actually do? Firewalls are preventive, technical controls that filter traffic by rules, and it is common to place them at the network edge to watch everything coming and going. Their rule list ends with an implicit deny, so anything not explicitly allowed is blocked. Simple guidelines help a lot, like blocking directed broadcasts and dropping traffic from the internet that carries a private, spoofed address. Firewalls have grown more capable over generations, from basic filtering to stateful inspection to next-generation devices that inspect deep into packets, filter malware, and fold in intrusion detection and prevention. A web application firewall specifically shields a web server from attacks like injection. Picture a gatekeeper who checks every passport against a strict rulebook and turns away anyone not on the approved list. What is sandboxing? Sandboxing is a virtualization technique that fences an application inside a security boundary, keeping it from touching other applications or the operating system. Anti-malware uses it to test suspicious programs safely, watching how an unknown file behaves before letting it near the real system. Developers use the same idea to test code in an isolated virtual machine, cut off from the host and network. If something misbehaves, the damage stays trapped in the box. Think of testing a firecracker inside a thick steel drum where any blast is contained. When do you bring in third-party security services? When it makes sense to hand certain security work to an outside individual or organization, such as auditing or penetration testing. Cloud providers also deliver security as a service, offering things like managed filtering and threat management from the cloud. But outsourcing the work never outsources the responsibility. If a standard like the major payment card requirements applies to you, your providers must comply too, and that accountability stays with you. Think of hiring an outside inspector. They do the work, but you still answer for the building. So let's bring it together. Honeypots and honeynets are decoys that distract and reveal attackers, staying on the legal side through enticement, not entrapment. Warning banners set defensible rules. Anti-malware works best layered across boundary, email, and endpoint, backed by least privilege and education. Allow and deny lists govern what runs. Firewalls filter traffic and end in an implicit deny, and sandboxing contains untrusted code. Third-party services extend your reach, but never your responsibility. Together, these controls form the layered defense that catches what any single tool would miss. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 17.3, part 1. This is the 180th session of the CISSP exam prep series. This part shifts from stopping attacks to recording and reviewing what actually happens. In this session, we'll build the foundation of logging and monitoring. We'll answer several questions. What is logging, and why does accountability depend on it? What are the common types of logs? How do you protect log data from tampering? What are audit trails, and how do they enable accountability? And how do monitoring and audit trails support investigations and troubleshooting? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because when something goes wrong, your logs are the story of what happened. Picture a payroll team investigating who opened a confidential salary file at an odd hour. Without solid logs and secure identity, that question has no answer. On the job, logging and monitoring are how you hold people accountable, reconstruct incidents, and produce evidence that holds up. They quietly underpin nearly every investigation you will run. What is logging, and why does accountability depend on it? Logging records, events, into a file or database, capturing what happened, when, where, and who did it. When you need to reconstruct a recent event, logs are where you start. But logging alone is not enough for accountability. It only works if your identification and authentication are secure. If it is easy to impersonate another user, a log entry might accuse the wrong person entirely. So secure identity is the prerequisite. A log shows a user opened a file, but only trustworthy authentication makes that record fair. Think of a signed visitor book that only means something if you truly verified each signer. What are the common types of logs? Different logs capture different slices of activity. Security logs record access to resources like files and folders, showing who read, changed, or deleted them. System logs record events like startups, shutdowns, and services stopping, which can reveal an attacker tampering with a machine. Application logs capture whatever the developer chose to record. Firewall logs note traffic allowed and blocked, with source and destination details, but not packet contents. Proxy logs track which sites users visit, and change logs record change requests, approvals, and the changes themselves. Picture a set of specialized cameras, each pointed at a different doorway in the building. How do you protect log data from tampering? Because logs only have value if they are trustworthy. If an attacker can edit them, they can erase their own tracks and destroy the log's worth as evidence. So protect them against unauthorized access and change. A common move is to copy logs to a central system, so even corrupted originals still have a clean copy elsewhere. Restrict access with tight permissions, set archived logs to read-only, and add physical protection. Organizations also set retention policies, keeping logs for a defined period, then destroying them when no longer needed. Keeping logs longer than required can actually backfire, forcing you to search years of extra data during a legal matter. Think of storing sealed records in a locked vault and shredding them on schedule. What are audit trails, and how do they enable accountability? An audit trail is the record built when event details land in your logs and databases. It captures system activity so you can reconstruct what led up to and happened during a security event in forward or reverse order. Audit trails give you accountability by tying logged actions back to the user who performed them, after that user proved their identity. That very fact deters bad behavior. People who know their actions are recorded are less likely to break the rules. Audit trails are also passive detection controls and essential evidence for prosecution, which is exactly why advanced attackers try to find and delete them. Think of a flight recorder that quietly captures everything for later review. How do monitoring and audit trails support investigations and troubleshooting? They let you rebuild events long after they occur, exposing access abuses, privilege violations, and attempted intrusions. For this to work, timestamps must be accurate and consistent across the environment, which is why organizations sync clocks to a trusted time source. Beyond security, audit trails also help with plain troubleshooting. They record system failures, software errors, and crash details, helping you tell a genuine attack from a faulty component. That is often called problem identification. A repeatedly crashing system, for instance, might turn out to be failing memory rather than an intruder. Think of a detailed diary that helps you separate sabotage from an honest accident. So let's bring it together. Logging records events, but accountability depends on pairing it with secure identity. Common logs, security, system, application, firewall, proxy, and change each capture a different view. Protect log data by centralizing it, restricting access, and setting retention and destruction policies. Audit trails, reconstruct events, tie actions to users, deter misconduct, and serve as evidence. And synchronized, well-kept logs power both investigations and everyday troubleshooting. Get this foundation right, and monitoring becomes your most reliable witness. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 17.3, part 2. This is the 181st session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. This part turns raw logs into usable intelligence with the tools and techniques that scale. In this session, we'll cover how organizations actually work with all that log data. We'll answer several questions. What are monitoring and tuning, and why are they continuous? What does a security information and event management system do? What are syslog and sampling? What are clipping levels? What other monitoring tools help? What is log management? And what is egress monitoring? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because a fire hose of raw logs helps no one. Picture a security operations team drowning in millions of daily events, unable to see the one that matters. The skill is turning that flood into signal. On the job, you tune the tools, set the thresholds, and watch the data leaving your network. Done well, monitoring surfaces the real threat. Done poorly, it buries it under noise until it is too late. What are monitoring and tuning, and why are they continuous? Monitoring is reviewing your logs to find something specific, whether by hand or with automated tools, so you can catch malicious actions and failures. Tuning is adjusting your controls to fit your environment. Intrusion detection systems especially need tuning to cut false positives. Too sensitive and endless alerts breed alert fatigue, where analysts feel buried and start ignoring warnings. Not sensitive enough, and a real intrusion slips by. Both are ongoing. Because your environment keeps changing, and modern monitoring must even watch production machine learning models for adversarial attacks and drift. Think of tuning a radio dial. Too far one way is static, too far the other is silence. What does a security information and event management system do? This is the central engine that automates monitoring across your whole network. Agents on remote systems watch for specific trigger events and report them to a central server, giving you real-time analysis, alerting, and long-term storage in one place. Its real power is correlation and aggregation. It pulls data from many different devices and converts it into meaningful information, spotting patterns no single log would reveal. For instance, it can notice an email server's queue backing up and alert an administrator before it turns serious. Modern versions even apply machine learning to surface what matters. Think of a central command room where dozens of separate feeds combine into one clear picture. What are syslog and sampling? Syslog is a standard protocol for sending event notification messages to a central server. It defines how to format and transmit those messages, historically common on Unix and Linux, with extensions that let it accept messages from almost any source. Sampling, meanwhile, is pulling a smaller set of data from a huge pool to represent the whole, a form of data reduction. Statistical sampling uses precise math to extract meaning from large volumes. much like a pollster gauging a population without asking everyone. It is more reliable and mathematically defensible, though there is always some margin of error. Think of tasting a spoonful of soup to judge the whole pot. What are clipping levels? A clipping level is a form of non-statistical sampling that only reacts once events cross a set threshold. Below that line, the system stays quiet. Take failed logins. Instead of alarming on every single mistyped password, you might raise an alert only after 5 failures in half an hour. Account lockouts work the same way, counting failures and acting only at the threshold. Clipping levels help establish a baseline of routine activity, so the system ignores the normal churn and speaks up only for real patterns of concern. It is discretionary and misses anything under the line, but it is cheaper and simpler than full statistical sampling. Think of a noise gate that ignores whispers and only reacts to a shout. What other monitoring tools help? Beyond logs, a few extra tools earn their place. Closed-circuit television can record events for later review or be watched live, and it even keeps guards themselves accountable. Keystroke monitoring records what a user types, usually via a keylogger. Attackers use it maliciously, but in tightly controlled environments, an organization may use it too, and when they do, they nearly always have to notify users first. Traffic and trend analysis, sometimes called network flow monitoring, studies the flow of packets rather than their contents. It can infer routes, server locations, and volumes, and can flag oddities like an account suddenly blasting out huge amounts of email, a possible sign of a botnet, or an insider leaking data. Think of watching the flow of cars on a highway without ever reading a license plate. What is log management? Log management covers everything you do to collect, process, and protect log entries. A central system aggregates entries from many sources, analyzes them, and flags what looks suspicious. Once entries are safely forwarded, the originals can be cleaned up, often with rollover logging, where a log hits a size cap and then overwrites its oldest entries. You can also archive logs to new files when they fill, though that risks filling the disk, or schedule a script to copy them off to another location. The goal is to preserve the entries you need without letting logs swallow your storage. Think of a rolling ledger that keeps recent pages while safely archiving the rest. What is egress monitoring? Egress monitoring watches traffic leaving your network, not just what comes in or moves around inside. Its purpose is catching unauthorized data leaving, known as data exfiltration. Data loss prevention tools lead here, spotting sensitive data and blocking its transmission. And they can also read digital watermarks embedded in files to catch protected content on the way out. Another concern is steganography, hiding messages inside files like images. You can detect it by comparing hashes of a suspect file against a known good original. And since advanced attackers often encrypt data before sending it out, monitor the volume, destination, and source of encrypted traffic even when you cannot read the contents. Think of an exit inspector checking every outbound package for hidden or stolen goods. So let's bring it together. Monitoring reviews, logs while tuning keeps controls sharp, and both run continuously to fight alert fatigue and drift. A security information and event management system centralizes, correlates, and analyzes events across everything. Syslog moves messages, sampling and clipping levels reduce data to what matters, and extra tools like flow analysis add context. Log management preserves entries without flooding storage, and egress monitoring stops data from sneaking out. Together, these turn an overwhelming stream of logs into decisions you can act on. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 17.4, part 1. This is the 182nd session of the CISSP exam prep series. This part explores how automation and learning systems lighten the response workload. In this session, we'll look at automating the response to incidents. We'll answer several questions. What problem does response automation solve? What is security, orchestration, automation, and response? How do playbooks and runbooks differ? And what actually separates machine learning from artificial intelligence? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because analysts cannot manually chase every alert forever. Picture a lean security team facing hundreds of repetitive warnings a day, each demanding the same verify and respond dance. Automation frees those people for the judgment calls that truly need a human. On the job, you are the one who designs these automated responses, decides what to trust to a machine, and keeps a human in the loop where it counts. What problem does response automation solve? Traditionally, an administrator handles every warning by hand, verify that the alert is real, then respond, often repeating the exact same rote steps they have done 100 times. Consider a flood attack on a screen subnet. Tools raise the alert, an administrator confirms it, then manually adjusts the server setting to weather the attack, and later reverses that change once it stops. That is slow, tedious, and prone to human error. Automation targets exactly this kind of repetitive, well-understood work. Think of a task you do the same way every single time and how much a machine could take off your plate. What is security orchestration, automation, and response? Often shortened to SOAR, it is a group of technologies that let organizations respond to some incidents automatically. Instead of an analyst working every alert by hand, the system verifies and reacts on its own, following rules you defined in advance. The hard part is not the technology, it is the upfront work of documenting every known incident and its correct response, then configuring the tools to act. Do that well, and the machine handles the routine flood while your people focus on the unusual. Think of an autopilot that flies the steady stretches so the crew can concentrate on the tricky approaches. How do playbooks and runbooks differ? These are the two halves of SOAR. A playbook is the written document. It defines how to verify a given incident and lays out the response steps in plain language a person can follow. A runbook takes that playbook and implements it in an automated tool, so the system carries out those conditional steps on its own. So the playbook is the plan, and the runbook is the plan put into motion by software. Crucially, the playbook doubles as a manual backup. If the automation fails, your team can still follow the written steps by hand. Think of a recipe card versus a programmed kitchen robot that cooks from that same recipe. What separates machine learning from artificial intelligence? People often use the terms interchangeably, but they are not the same, and machine learning is actually a part of the broader field of artificial intelligence. Here is the cleanest way to see it. A machine learning system starts with a set of rules or a baseline, then improves through experience, getting better as it gathers more data. An artificial intelligence system starts with nothing, no rules at all, and progressively learns them from feedback, then writes its own strategies as it goes. Picture two players learning a board game. One is handed the rulebook and practices to master it, while the other is given no rules and must deduce them from being told only when they win or lose. How do these apply to detection? Behavior-based detection is a perfect example of both at work. A machine learning system takes the administrator's baseline of normal activity as its starting rules, watches for anomalies, and learns from feedback about which alerts were real and which were false, refining the baseline over time. An artificial intelligence system starts with no baseline at all, builds one purely from the traffic it observes, and hunts for anomalies as it learns. One key caution: as the environment shifts, a learned model can drift out of step with reality, so continuous monitoring and retraining are needed to keep its judgments valid. Think of a security guard who either starts with a briefing or learns the building's rhythm entirely on their own. So let's bring it together. Response automation attacks the slow, repetitive, verify and respond work that wears analysts down. Security orchestration, automation, and response handles known incidents automatically once you do the upfront work of documenting them. Playbooks are the written plans, runbooks are those plans automated, and the playbook stays a manual backup. Machine learning starts with rules and improves, while artificial intelligence starts with nothing and derives its own, and both power modern detection as long as you watch for drift. Automate the routine, and your people focus where judgment matters most. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 17.4, part 2. This is the 183rd session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. This part turns to threat intelligence and how it ties the whole defensive picture together. In this session, we'll explore how organizations get ahead of threats. We'll answer several questions. What is threat intelligence? What is the kill chain? And how do you break it? What is the MITRE attack matrix? What are threat feeds? What is threat hunting? And how do all these automation and intelligence pieces intersect? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because waiting for an alarm means you are always a step behind. Picture a bank's security team that studies attacker techniques and hunts through its own systems before any tool sounds an alert. That proactive stance catches intruders who would otherwise linger for months. On the job, threat intelligence is how you shift from reacting to attacks to anticipating them, and how you feed that foresight into everything else you have built. What is threat intelligence? Threat intelligence is the practice of gathering data about current and potential threats from many sources, then turning it into timely, usable knowledge. Organizations use it to actively hunt for threats rather than passively wait. The point is not just collecting raw data, it is extracting what actually helps you defend, like which domains, addresses, or malware are dangerous right now. Think of a weather service that does not just record conditions, but forecast the storm so you can prepare before it hits. What is the kill chain, and how do you break it? The kill chain describes an attack as an ordered sequence of stages, adapted from a military model. A well-known cyber version runs from reconnaissance to weaponization, to delivery, to exploitation, to installation, to command and control, and finally to actions on objectives where the attacker achieves their goal. The crucial insight is that every stage depends on the ones before it. Break the chain at any single link, and the whole attack collapses. If users dodge the phishing at the delivery stage, the weapon never lands and the attacker fails. Think of a relay race where dropping the baton at any handoff ends the run. What is the MITRE attack matrix? It is a knowledge base of the tactics, techniques, and procedures that real attackers use, and it complements kill chain models. The key difference is structure. A kill chain is an ordered sequence, but the attack matrix is not ordered. It lays out tactics like reconnaissance, persistence, privilege escalation, lateral movement, and exfiltration side by side in a matrix, with specific techniques under each. It is a living document, updated regularly as attackers evolve. There is also a companion framework focused on adversarial attacks against artificial intelligence and machine learning systems, extending this thinking to modern threats. Think of a reference encyclopedia of attacker moves you can look up in any order. What are threat feeds? A threat feed is a steady stream of raw data about current and potential threats, much like subscribing to a constant stream of updates. In raw form, it is hard to use, so a threat intelligence feed refines it into actionable items, like suspicious domains, known malware hashes, and addresses tied to malicious activity. By comparing feed data against your own network traffic, you can spot dangerous connections. If a known bad domain shows up in your logs, that traffic is obviously worth investigating. Checking this by hand is tedious, so organizations use tools that cross-reference automatically. Think of a live watch list that instantly flags any known troublemaker at your gates. What is threat hunting? Threat hunting is actively searching your network for threats instead of waiting for tools to raise an alarm. It starts from a bold assumption. Attackers are already inside, even if nothing has flagged them yet. So you go looking. Say a feed reports a botnet with specific signs, particular files or traffic patterns. Once you know what to look for, you can script searches across your systems to find those indicators. This matters because modern attackers often lurk quietly for months rather than striking immediately. Many hunts use a kill chain model, looking for signs of each attack phase. Think of a detective who walks the building searching for clues rather than waiting for an alarm to ring. How do all these automation and intelligence pieces intersect? This is where everything connects. Automation, through playbooks and runbooks, handles known incidents and clears out routine false positives. The danger is the false negative, the real threat that goes undetected, and the fix is keeping your systems informed of new threats. That is where threat feeds come in. When automation can ingest a feed, it updates every prevention and detection system in real time, blocking a newly reported bad domain the instant it appears. Layer machine learning and artificial intelligence on top, and the whole system keeps sharpening itself while cutting the human workload. Think of a smart home that not only follows your rules but also subscribes to safety bulletins and adjusts itself automatically. So let's bring it together. Threat intelligence turns raw data into foresight so you can act before an attack matures. The kill chain models an attack as ordered, stages you aim to break at any link, while the attack matrix catalogs attacker techniques in no fixed order. Threat feeds stream actionable indicators you match against your traffic, and threat hunting sends you searching on the assumption attackers are already in. Tie automation, learning systems, and threat feeds together, and your defenses update themselves in real time. That completes the arc from preventing incidents to detecting, responding, and staying ahead of them. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session.